Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Fraser. I am a meteorologist with the NBC affiliate here in Cleveland, Ohio. And today we're going to be discussing what exactly is hail and why is it so dangerous. But as always, I like to get started with a joke of the day, and this joke involves lightning. So, why does the lightning bolt always gasp whenever it sees itself on television, on the news? Hmm. All right, you ready? Here we go. Three, two, because it always finds everything shocking. Get it? Lightning, shocking. All right. And I thought that was funny. As always, I like your weather questions. You can feel free to drop me an email at jfrazer@wkyc.com, or you can feel free to leave a comment right below. All right, so today we're going to be discussing hail and how it forms and how it gets its size and shape. And then we're going to talk a little bit about why hail is so dangerous. And then we're going to discuss something that confuses a lot of people, which is sometimes they'll call grapple hail, and then they'll call hail sleet, and then sleet grapple. So, what exactly are those three things, and how can you pretty much tell the difference? So first, we're going to discuss these superstorms, these supercell thunderstorms. We've been talking a lot about this over the last week. This is generally where you see those hails, as I like to call them, right? So we can get hail with other type of systems, but usually we tend to see hail during thunderstorms, particularly supercell thunderstorms. Now, you may remember that supercell thunderstorms, that's where we see those updrafts that are upwards of 100 miles per hour, and they're really responsible for some of the tornadoes that we see and some of the flash flooding. Usually, we will see hail or rain before we see the tornado. Usually, it goes really cloudy, hail, lots of wind, and then boom, you have a tornado. But what exactly is hail? So, hail is basically nothing more than ice that forms within a thunderstorm. And it forms because of updrafts. Now, remember what we had said before in our previous lessons updrafts, that is a huge gust of wind. Where? Up, right? So, we're talking 50, 60, 70, 100 miles. So, how exactly does hail become hail? Well, it really depends on where you are, but I wanted to kind of give you just a generic viewpoint of what happens with hail. So, usually, whenever you have a thunderstorm that's moving across an area, you'll get a mixture of warm air that's being uplifted, right? And usually, you'll also get some cold air that's pretty much behind it. Hence the reason why you tend to have what we call warm updrafts and cold downdrafts. That's usually the reason why it's a bit warmer before the thunderstorm, but it's usually a bit cooler after. Not always, but for the most part. So what happens is that moisture gets pushed upward, right? And at some point, when it gets to the top of that cumulonimbus cloud or that superstorm or that supercell thunderstorm, I should say, tends to be really, 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 really cold. And so you have that moisture that starts turning into ice, right? It starts being attached to some other things within that thunderstorm. Maybe it's dust, maybe it's something else. And usually it starts to harden and it becomes a ball of hail or a hailstone. Now, eventually, what's going to happen is this, all right? That hailstone is going to be caught up in that updraft. It's going to start freezing. And then at some point, it's going to get too heavy for that cloud and it's going to fall down to the ground, all right? Usually, we can tell how many times that has happened, right? It's been caught up in an updraft and then it goes down. And then sometimes you'll actually see this happen multiple times within a cloud where it gets caught up in an updraft, goes back down, caught back up with another updraft, and then it goes down. We can determine how many times this has happened based on what we call hail growth rings, all right? And what happens is we as experts, we can actually take the piece of hail, we can break it open, and we can see different colors like you see there on your screen. And the cool part is usually each ring represents at one time that it was at one point frozen and then I got caught up in something else and started going down within the cloud. And at some point, it got caught up in another updraft or maybe the same updraft and it refroze. So that's the reason why you start to see these little like ring things that are around here. It's really cool. And they can actually be different colors. It really depends on what else is going on within that cloud. Now, hail falling to the ground can fall at a different rates. So not every piece of hail, or I should say a hailstone, is going to fall down to the ground at the same rate. Now, the speed at which the hailstone is falling is based on a variety of things. So, friction, wind, how big or how small that hailstone is, and then temperature. And the best way to describe this is if I had a pen and a remote, right? This pen, if I drop it right there, yeah, there you go. It drops, right? It drops at a certain rate, all right? And because it's lighter, it's probably not going to break. But if I were to drop this remote, what would happen? It would fall at a much faster rate than this is. Why? Because this remote is much heavier than this. So that's the reason why we tend to see bigger hailstones tend to have more damage on things because they tend to be bigger and they're falling at a much faster rate. So usually with the speed of hail, it's pretty hard to determine exactly what rate a piece of hail is falling, all right? And that's because not all hail within the same storm is going to be the same size or the same shape, all right? But I'm going to give you some hardened, I'll call them some loosey-goosey rules, just in terms of how fast the hailstones can fall. So if it's a smaller hailstone, we're talking about like the size of a pea, right, that you eat, it usually can fall from the sky at anywhere between 9 and about 25 miles per hour. But if you get a medium-sized one, it can fall anywhere between 25 to 45 miles per hour. And if you get some of the largest hailstones, I mean, we're talking about like the size of golf ball. Well, no, I shouldn't say golf balls. More like softballs. Yeah, it could fall anywhere between 45 to 100 miles per hour. Can you imagine that? And usually it's not just one hailstone. Usually you have multiple hailstones. So when you get some very large hail, you can get a lot of damage very quickly. And we're going to be talking about that in a second. So hailstones, as I mentioned, they can be a different type of, they can be a variety of different sizes. All right. So they can be really small pebbles or they can be very large pieces. Now, the smaller hail, in order for it to be hail, it has to be at least 2/10 of an inch in diameter. All right. So the smallest type of hail that we can see as meteorologists are those pea-sized hails. Right? And again, it looks like the size of a pea that you normally eat, right, for dinner. I know you absolutely love eating your vegetables. And then we can have penny-sized hail, which is about 3/4 of an inch in diameter. From there, we go up to some medium sizes. All right, so we're talking about nickel-size hail or quarter-size hail. Anytime you get quarter-size hail or larger, it's considered severe. And the reason why is because remember, I talked about the speed at which the hail is forming, or I should say that it's falling. So if it's falling really fast, what's going to end up happening? It's going to likely do a lot of damage because, as you can see right there in that picture, the hail is usually falling with lots of other hail. It's normally not just, oh, just one piece of hail and boop, done. All right. Ping pong ball hail is usually about an inch and a half. Golf ball, yeah, that's gonna hurt your skin. That's gonna definitely tend to injure you or the people that are around you. Larger hail sizes, tennis balls, baseballs, I mean, those are 2 inches in diameter or more. Grapefruit size hails, that is 4.5 inches in diameter or larger. So these can get really big very quickly. So where exactly does hail fall? Well, hail can really fall anywhere that a thunderstorm can happen, but there are a couple of places in the United States where we tend to see hail more. They include places like Nebraska, Colorado, and Wyoming. They make up what we call Hail Alley. Some of you may have heard of Tornado Alley. There is something called Hail Alley, and they usually will average anywhere between 7 to about 9 days where they get hailstorms. And these hailstorms are similar to just like your regular old rainstorms, but instead of getting rain, you get hail. So there tends to be a lot of damage because of these storms. The other place that you may not realize across the world where hail happens are places like China and Russia and India and northern Italy. So these are places that have a lot of experience with hail. And again, things can get very dangerous very quickly. So question I always get is, so where is the place where we have seen the largest hail? Well, that's a pretty difficult question because sometimes, depending on what happens with the hail, sometimes it can actually start melting right away as soon as it touches the ground. Sometimes, because of the measuring mechanism that we use, they can be varying degrees. And sometimes because of the shape, right? You could have a hailstone that's this big, but only, maybe about a half of an inch wide. Or sometimes you can have a really big hailstone that's about this tall, but sometimes it's really skinny. So it's kind of a hard question to answer. But for this lesson, we're just going to go based on diameter. And the one that has the largest diameter fell in South Dakota. This was back in 2010, July 23rd, 2010. And it was about 2 pounds in terms of weight, and it was about 8 inches in diameter. And as you can see, that wasn't the only one. There were multiple pieces of hail that fell. So yeah, did a lot of damage. So, speaking of damage, let's talk about the damage that hail can do. All right. So, people might think, oh, hail, it's so pretty, it's falling. No, it can actually make things very slippery, including the roads. And sometimes you're actually looking at the roads and you may think, oh, that looks like snow. I can drive on it. But yeah, you find out very quickly that it's not really snow, it's hail. And hail tends to be really, 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 really slippery. Unlike snow sometimes. Sometimes with snow, you can just walk right on it and you'll be fine, particularly if you have the right boots or if you have the right tires on your vehicle. With hail, it tends to be really slippery. And sometimes with hail, you can get these hail drifts. And that's basically where the hail just piles up in one area and it can cause flooding. The other part of hail that's really dangerous is, remember I had mentioned the size, and sometimes it'll actually be falling at 45, 50, 60 miles per hour. Well, think about when that hits your house, or think about when it hits a car. It's going to break a lot of windows, it's going to leave a lot of dents. So, hail in a lot of places can cause millions upon millions of dollars in damage. And that's why sometimes people will pay extra with insurance in some parts of the country because, yeah, they tend to get hail more than others. Now, I want to clear up some confusion between hail, grapple, sleet, and then snow. Because a lot of people tend to call hail sleet or grapple, and it's really very different. So we know what snow is, right? It comes out of the sky, it's white. Usually it has flakes and whatnot. So I'm not going to discuss snow, but I am going to discuss about grapple first. So grapple is nothing more than super cooled water that forms on snow crystals. So you usually have to have snow in order to have grapple. It's also referred to as what we call soft hail. So usually hail tends to be very hard. All right, it falls and usually you'll just see it right there. It sticks on the ground. Whereas grapple, as soon as you pick it up, it usually falls apart right away because you got to remember it's forming on top of snow. Now, with sleets, it's also referred to as ice pellets. They are usually small ice particles that form from freezing rain that has, or I should say, it's small ice particles that form on rain drops that have frozen. All right. So, what has happened is way high up in the sky, it's began as snow. It encountered some part of the sky where it's really warm, and then it starts to warm up into a raindrop, and then at some point it'll freeze over right before it hits the ground, and that's usually when you have sleet. All right. So again, remember I mentioned with hail, it needs to be about 2/10 of an inch in order to be classified as hail, and with sleet, we don't really have those measurements. All right. Sleet is also very common during snowstorms or winter snow, or I should say winter storms, whereas obviously with hail, you tend to get it during thunderstorms. All right, that's our lesson for today. Tomorrow, I'm going to be talking more about weather forecasting. So, how do I come up with my actual weather forecast every night? What exactly do I review? I'm going to let you in on a few secrets. I'm not going to tell you everything. I don't want you to steal my job, but I do want to give you an idea of pretty much what we do each and every night to bring you the news. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to email me, jfrazer@wkyc.com, or you can feel free to tag me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, as well as Snapchat @JasonFrazerTV. Have a wonderful day. See you soon.